All right, guys, and welcome back to our channel. Thanks for joining me today. And I'm Lee, if you did not know, and with my wife Betty, we are the traveling expats. So something I wanted to talk with you about today, something that's been on my mind for a while now, for a few months, and something that may be slightly controversial, but I wanted to talk about patriotism, or displays of patriotism, pride in your home country, or maybe some shame and actions of your home country, and how this is different between the United States and Germany. Now, I'm not trying to tell anyone that they should or should not be proud of their country, or they should be ashamed of their country, or how to display their pride in their country. That's completely up to you. But I kind of want to talk about how I see it and the differences between the two countries. Now, I feel like as someone, I've lived, a good part of my life. I was raised in the United States, and I've lived a good part of my life in Germany. I served for many years in the U.S. military, and I also worked as a civilian employee for the German military for a couple years. So I feel like I'm at least a little qualified to speak on this topic. All right, so let's go. All right, so virtually, every nation in the world has conducted or participated in, promoted, or maybe just turned a blind eye and allowed evil, shameful, and horrible things to happen, right? So basically every nation has done that. So why is it, somewhat embarrassing or maybe frowned upon to fly the German flag when you're in Germany, unless there's like a major international athletic competition going on? But in the United States, it's not only okay to fly the American flag anytime, but it's oftentimes expected, and if you don't, show outward signs of patriotism, you might be accused of, of not loving your country, or hating the USA or something like that. And, not just Germany and the United States, or not just the United States, but, also, any of these countries, for example, the United Kingdom, France, Turkey, Belgium, Japan, they all have, things from their past that may not be, quite so honorable. But still, if you go to any of those countries, you're going to see their flags being flown all over the place. So why is it that Germany, it's frowned upon, but these other countries, you can do it? All right, so I first came to Germany in the mid-1990s as a 24-year-old soldier. And I had a very much an America first, a USA first perspective, at looking at the world. So, I was not only had no doubt that the United States was the greatest country in the world at everything, well, except, unimportant sports like soccer. But hey, no one else has ever won the Super Bowl besides the United States. But I also just assumed that every other country was fighting tooth and nail, and they were envious of us, and they wanted to take that title of greatest country in the world away from us. But as I experienced life in Germany and traveled throughout Germany and throughout Europe, I realized that here, most people couldn't care less about having the title world's greatest country, and except when the World Cup is being played, then they all want to win that. And then another thing that I realized was that maybe some other countries, and this is quite a shocker to my friends from the United States, maybe some other countries actually do some things better than we do. It's a novel concept, right? And another thing, and I was amazed as I traveled around Germany at how nice some things were and how nice some things functioned, and it just really seemed to be, the more I stayed here, the more I really enjoyed it. But I always kind of wondered, why were there no obvious signs of pride in Germany or German patriotism. Right, so I was stationed at a very large American training area, which is set next to a very small village in Bavaria. And, I think that for the 3 years that I was stationed there, the only place I ever saw a German flag was on the U.S. Army base. And for those of you who may not know, at all U.S. military bases in Germany, everywhere that the U.S. flag is posted, the German flag is also posted right alongside with it. And actually, outside on the main headquarters where they post the main flags outside, the German flag is actually placed in the higher place of precedence, the higher place of honor over the U.S. flag, and that's just that's the way it was agreed upon in the Status of Forces Agreement for stationing U.S. forces here. And so the flags, and also I almost never hear the German national anthem played except on U.S. military bases when they're having a ceremony. So, and that's the other thing. Not only do we always display the German flag with the United States flag, but also when we play the U.S. national anthem, we also always play the German national anthem with it. And that's something I'm going to talk about more here in a bit. And so as I traveled around, I never saw the German flag anywhere. Now, I saw the Bavarian flag everywhere. Traveling through Bavaria, you're going to see the Bavarian flag everywhere. And so the Bavarians, they seemed, just as proud of the Bavarian flag as Americans are of the Stars and Stripes, or maybe it's closer to like the pride Texans have to their state flag. But Bavarians, are very proud, but I never saw the German flag anywhere, and I always kind of wondered why. Okay, so fast forward about 25 years, and I'm working as a civilian for the German military. And I was having a conversation with a young non-commissioned officer or Unteroffizier in the German Army, and he had recently spent some time working on one of the U.S. military bases in Germany and working with an American unit. And he came back, and I asked him about his experience, how everything went. He said it was fantastic. He had a great time, and was telling me some things. And he was talking about how cool he thought it was that American soldiers could just go out and show their pride in the United States and how proud they were of America. And he thought that American patriotism was really fantastic. And he thought it was just so awesome how American soldiers start their day. The very first thing, they go out and they salute the flag as they raise it every morning. And he just thought that was a great experience, something that they didn't do in the German military. And then he said something that really kind of stood out to me. And I'll never forget, he just said, he goes, I wish German soldiers could be proud of our country. I wish we could show our pride in Germany. He said, but if we do that, then everybody just calls us Nazis. And I thought, wow, how tough is that? And then the more I thought about it, I realized that, German patriotism is very subdued, even on a German military base. And, and like I said earlier, I think, I've heard I know for a fact, I've heard the German national anthem played more often on American military bases. I think the 4 years I worked on the German military base, I don't think I heard the German national anthem one time. And even when we would have ceremonies, they would oftentimes play ceremonial military music and marches, but they never played the German national anthem, which is so different than from the U.S. military. And, I asked my program director one time, we were at the ceremony, I was like, hey, how come they never play the German national anthem? And he's like, it's just not something we do here in the German military. And I just thought that was very strange. All right, so why is there so much shame or guilt, and being a proud German, or being proud of the nation of Germany. And of course, I know about, I'm very well aware of the horrendous history of the Holocaust and Nazism and the Second World War. And I'm in no way trying to minimize those evil, tragic events that led to the death of over 6 million people. But if you think about it, that was a 12-year period of history that ended 80 years ago. So, anyone who is responsible for any of that, they're long since dead, right? And I think Germany does a fantastic job of remembering the victims of National Socialism and anyone who tried to resist National Socialism. I mean, you can see monuments, all over the place. And I think that's fantastic. And Germany also does a great job of teaching its children, about, the horrible things that their nation did, and to teach them the responsibility to ensure that it never happens again. And, I would say that as a foreigner living in Germany, to the nation of Germany, I would say, hey, that is something that's very admirable and something that you can definitely be proud of, And most of the world, has for quite a long time had a very positive, favorable view of Germany, And case in point, look at this book by British author John Kempner, which I read a few years ago, and it's, why the Germans do it better. And it talks about, different things, how Germans do different things, how the nation of Germany does things, and why it's so good at many of the things it does. And definitely a lot of points of pride are mentioned in that book. All right, so now I want to talk about my home country, the United States of America. And the USA is, it's a very proud country. And to be honest, the United States has many reasons to be proud. The United States, in my opinion, has done, many fantastic things throughout its history. But we also have many reasons to be ashamed of as well. And if you think about it, for the first roughly 90 years of our history, a large part of the country thought it was perfectly acceptable for one human being to own another human being, like they were livestock. And, this was such an important issue that for half the country that we actually split and went to war over it. And then, after slavery and after the Civil War, it didn't end there. We had segregation that lasted for another 75 years. And so, these segregation laws, they mandated that people of color, they have separate facilities like schools and restrooms. And my own parents, who graduated high school in the late 1960s in Arkansas, all the African-American kids that lived around them, they had to be bused over 20 miles away to go to a separate school because, white kids and black kids couldn't go to school together back then. And, like I said, so I grew up in Arkansas, which was a southern state and was a proud member of the Confederacy. And, I was never made to feel guilty about any of that, about the history of my country or my state. And I don't think I should have been made to feel guilty about it. I mean, obviously, I had nothing to do with slavery, segregation, or the World War II internment camps. But I should have been taught about those things. And, and I should have been taught in a way that doesn't just brush over or gloss over them, in an attempt to justify them. And I never forget, I remember one time I was in school in history class, and we were discussing, the Civil War and events that led up to the Civil War, and the topic of slavery came up. And I'll never forget, my teacher said something along the lines of, well, slaves were well taken care of because they were very expensive. So if you had to pay so much money for a slave, you're not going to mistreat them, And that's kind of the mindset that is used, I think, to justify slavery in the United States. And of course, you know, oh, and the other thing, so my hometown is about 50 miles, approximately 50 miles from Little Rock Central High School. But to be honest, I didn't know anything about the Little Rock Nine, or that the U.S. Army was actually deployed, the 101st Airborne Division, parts of it was actually deployed to Little Rock just to ensure that African American kids could safely go to high school. I didn't know any of that until years later when I took a history course with the University of Maryland, and then I learned all that. But I wasn't taught that in school, and it happened just 50 miles away from where I grew up. The whole time, I never knew what in the world Billy Joel was singing about when he mentioned Little Rock in his hit song, We Didn't Start the Fire. And it's not just African Americans. I mean, the whole nation of the United States was created by taking away land, lying, killing, and cheating the original inhabitants of that land. And, during arguably the greatest period of history of the United States, the period that we're most proud of, World War II, we forced American citizens of Japanese heritage into internment camps. So we took all their property away and forced them into these camps. And these people, they lost their homes, they lost their livelihoods simply because of their Japanese heritage. And, Americans have very little guilt over any of these acts, and, quite the opposite. Honestly, when I grew up, almost as many people flew the Confederate flag as flew the flag of the United States. And our participation in the Confederacy, was honestly, it was a point of pride, not shame. And the phrase, the South will rise again, along with the stars and bars of the Confederacy, was said and were flown all the time. And it's not just the United States or Germany, of course. How much shame do the United Kingdom or France have of their histories of colonialism? And, Japan, too. So my mother-in-law, she grew up in Japanese-occupied Korea before World War II. And she would always speak about how hard life was and how cruel the Japanese were. And, we know that the Japanese committed terrible crimes, all across Asia. But today they deny much of it, and they seem to be totally guilt-free of the things they've done. And, Turkey also has done questionable things in the past. But if you visit Turkey, I mean, you're going to see Turkish flags everywhere. I mean, Turkey probably rivals the United States as far as national pride by displaying flags all over the place. All right, so why do all these other countries that have conducted all these terrible acts, why do they seem to not suffer any national guilt like Germany does? And so I think there's a few reasons. And so, when it comes to the United States, for slavery, for example, it tends to get explained away with justifications like, all countries had slaves at one point or another. And, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I remember, listening to a history podcast once, and yes, I'm that big of a nerd that I listen to history podcasts. But so the historian was saying that, every human being alive on the face of the earth today, if you trace their ancestry back far enough, at some point you're going to find that they are the descendants of both slaves and slave owners. They said, we all come from both slaves and slave owners. You just got to go back far enough in our history. And, that's probably true. And certainly before the Industrial Revolution, I think probably every powerful nation relied, at least to a certain extent, upon slave labor to accomplish things. And then you look at, colonialism, and again, I think that gets justified by saying, everybody else was doing it, and every great nation, you either tried to expand your borders and you tried to grow and take new land, or get stronger, or you were going to get taken over by another country. I think maybe the biggest reason why Germany has so much guilt after the Second World War is because it was forced to have guilt by means of occupation. So after World War II, of course, Germany was occupied by the victorious Allies. That included, not only the United States, which was never attacked by Germany, but Germany was also occupied by the United Kingdom, France, and the Soviet Union. And these countries had just been through, not one, but two world wars with Germany. And I think when they occupied Germany, they really wanted to rub Germany's face in it a bit and really make Germany atone for the crimes that it had committed leading up to and during the Second World War. So I think that was a huge part of it. And basically, anything that depicted, and this applies especially in the eastern part of Germany, in the Soviet sector, anything that depicted pride in the nation of Germany or the German people, either before or after or during, especially the Second World War, but anything that showed, pride in the German nation was destroyed. Because, like I said, especially in the eastern sector, the Soviet Union didn't want anything around that would motivate the citizens of Germany to have pride in their country. So they destroyed all these monuments and memorials and things with one glaring exception, and that being, it just so happens to be the largest monument in all of Europe, the Völkerschlachtdenkmal, or otherwise known as the Memorial to the Battle of the Nations, this huge monument, which is in Leipzig, Germany. The Soviets didn't destroy that, which is strange because this was built in honor of German nationalism and German pride after the defeat of Napoleon at the Battle of Leipzig. But the Soviet Union allowed it to stay because this victory over Napoleon was conducted by a group of nations that. And Russia played a huge role in that. So, Russia played a huge role in the victory. So that's why they allowed the Völkerschlachtdenkmal to remain in Leipzig, even though it's the biggest monument in all of Europe and it celebrates German nationalism. So Germany had this occupation, and basically they forced Germany to come to terms with it. Also there was, it was fairly modern times as far as media goes. There was, video recordings, photographs of much of the damage that Germany had done. And then you had the Nuremberg trials, which were broadcast around the world. So, the whole world knew Germany was forced to take accountability. And I think Germany's done a great job of maintaining that accountability and remembering what it's done. And I definitely applaud the nation of Germany. I think that's something to be proud of. Now, the United States, on the other hand, after the Civil War, after the end of slavery, we've never been defeated by another country, in our home country, and we've never been occupied. So no one has ever forced the United States to come to terms with, some of the bad things it's done. So that's kind of a difference between the United States and Germany. All right, so ultimately, national pride is unique to every nation and every individual. And, I think all nations in the world, they have things to be proud of. And, they also have things to not be proud of. And just because someone doesn't go around waving a flag, it doesn't mean that they don't love their country. And ultimately, I don't think anyone has the right to tell someone else how to display or not display their patriotism or pride of their country. And that's just how I feel about it. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this topic interesting. I think it's interesting to look at, pride and patriotism, comparing between, the two countries I know the most about, the United States and Germany. So let us know in the comments, how do you feel about national pride or patriotism? What do you think it's good to display it, or should it be subdued? Let us know what you think. We appreciate you watching and, sharing your thoughts with us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.